Hey guys, welcome back to Fix It Friday, the weekly YouTube series where we talk about video game console repairs, mods, and restorations. And this week we've got something really special for you. This is the Sharp SF1 Super Famicom television. So I'm sure most of you guys are not familiar with this device and what it is, but we actually did get something kind of similar here in the United States. So basically, the company Sharp, which is known for making appliances and televisions, has a very long-standing relationship and partnership with Nintendo. Actually, if you go and you look at a lot of video game consoles made by Nintendo, you'll find chips that were manufactured by Sharp. So yeah, they have a very long history together, and this television is basically a Super Nintendo built into a Sharp TV. So in the United States, they actually made something very similar. It's called the Sharp Nintendo Television, and it's a Sharp TV with a NES inside of it. But they never made this here in the United States, which is a Super Famicom combined with a Sharp TV. So this television, from what I understand, pretty much works, and so does the Super Famicom. So you can take games and put it in there, and you will get sound, and you can apparently use the controllers and everything like that. But yeah, there's no display. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to take this thing apart. We're going to have a look at both the television and the Super Famicom and try to figure out which one of these devices is responsible for the problems. And hopefully we can figure out what's going on and make this thing fully operational. All right, let's get right to it. So I think what I'm going to do is start by just giving you an explanation of what you're seeing here. So here's the Super Famicom portion of the television, and so your game cartridges go in here, and technically American games would actually work. The only limitation is the shape of the cartridge slot. So if you take an American game PCB and just slide it in there, it would totally work, no problem. This here is the power on and off switch, and I know that when you toggle this to on, it actually automatically switches whatever you have on the TV directly to the Super Famicom. This is your standard reset button, and this is eject. So that's very much like your normal Super Famicom or Super Nintendo. So now down here you have your controller ports, and these are standard Super Nintendo controller ports. There's absolutely nothing fancy about that at all. And then there's like a little push button panel that opens up here, and here are your normal controls for volume and changing channels and adjusting brightness and contrast. And of course all of it is in Japanese, so if one is to mess around with it, you just kind of have to hit buttons and hope for the best. And then over here off to the side, this is the actual controller, and so unlike your standard Super Nintendo controller, you can see that this controller is branded with Sharp SF1. So that's really cool. I can imagine that these controllers are actually super rare, probably rarer than the televisions themselves, but my friend was fortunate enough to get the entire thing all together. So yeah, the next thing I'm going to do is actually flip it around and show you the back of the system. Okay, so we're here on the back of the Super Famicom SF1, and I wanted to show you that there's actually this little hidden flap back here. And yeah, I'm not sure if the light is really that good, but I'm going to just try to cast a little extra light here. So yeah, you can see that there's actually a multi-out port here. So you can actually connect the Super Nintendo on this console to another device, another television in fact. And I've actually done this already, and I've learned that RGB is actually working from here. So I can plug this into my OSSC, and I actually get video and audio. So that's actually very encouraging. That means that the Super Nintendo is probably mostly working. I don't get composite video out here though, so all of that together suggests that there's some kind of problem with composite video out on this Super Nintendo. And then this is the external port, this EXT port, and my understanding is that, Super Famicoms and Super Nintendos have a port like this. I don't believe this was ever used in the United States. However, I believe this was used for the broadcast Satellaview in Japan. So that's kind of interesting that you have full functionality to the Super Famicom here. And then if you go down, there's your standard RF jack and your composite video and audio out ports over there. So the back of the system is unremarkable. I've tested those too, and so you can in fact get video in from those. So again, all of this is suggesting that the TV is probably fine, and that my real challenge here is going to be to figure out what's wrong with the Super Famicom. So yeah, next thing we're going to do is start taking this thing apart and seeing how it works. And honestly, I have absolutely no idea what I'm getting myself into. All right, well, yeah, let's get to the disassembly. Alright, so most CRTs are actually pretty easy to disassemble. If you look on the back, you're going to find an assortment of Phillips screws, and this one is absolutely no different. So there's about 5 Phillips screws on this, and helpfully Sharp included some arrows so that you can see exactly where they are, so that makes disassembly pretty simple. And so you can see I've actually placed it down on a soft surface, and that's because, you know, I don't want to scratch up the CRT, and it's a glass surface, it's easy to scratch, and so just out of precaution, I put it down on a sheet just to protect it. So yeah, there's just a few more to go. Okay, I think that's everything. So now, yep, this just lifts straight up. So I'm gonna just see what I can do to get that up, hopefully without any incident. Alright, well, there we go. Ah, okay, there we go. I had to kind of separate out this plastic piece from the actual board. Not easy, but I'm getting there. There we go. Alright. Okay. So yeah, that was a bit awkward. It was mainly because of this right here. The power cord was kind of getting in the way. But yeah, now this is out and I can take a look at it. And I still don't actually see the Super Nintendo, but I think that's because it's all the way up here. And so yeah, I'm gonna keep going now. Now that it's actually accessible, we're gonna continue to take it apart some more and see what we find. Alright, so we're back, and I've got the CRT on the bench, and you can see here's the yoke and the neck board, and then here's our analog board. Looks like we've got an isolation transformer, and looks like the analog board has a little daughter board here as well. Not sure if that's related to the Super Nintendo or something else, but yeah, you might be wondering, okay, where's the Super Nintendo? Turns out it's all the way up there. It's that little rectangular RF shield is hiding the Super Nintendo. So yeah, so we've got a lot of work cut out for us. So there's like about 5 or so screws that are holding that in place. So I'm gonna need to go in and take those out. I also need to discharge the monitor. That's something that's very important when you're working with analog electronics and with CRTs in particular. They can build up quite a lot of voltage, and they can store that long after they've been turned off. And if you don't know what you're doing, and you don't know how to discharge them properly, frankly, they can kill you. And I'm not going to go into explaining how to discharge a CRT. There's a lot of YouTube videos on that. I do not want to be held responsible for anyone's accidental electrocution. So I'm going to go ahead and discharge the monitor on my own, off camera, and then I'm going to go ahead and take the Super Nintendo out by hopefully just removing those 5 screws. If there's more, I'll let you guys know. And yeah, we'll be back hopefully with just the Super Nintendo and we can see what's going on. Alright, so I managed to get the Super Nintendo out of the television. So yeah, it was kind of like what I expected. There were 5 screws holding it in place, and there was also some copper tape that was holding it down, so I just had to kind of pull the copper tape off and remove the 5 screws, and that was all that I needed to get the Super Nintendo out. I found that it was actually easier to work on it in a flat position with the tube facing downwards, so I actually went back to the sheet again to remove all the pieces. But yeah, once I did, that was it. So you can see here, this is where the copper tape was held in place, so I just kind of pulled that off. So the system is still in an RF shield, but I mean, if you look at it, it's really tiny compared to an official Super Nintendo. And all of the connectors are over here. So this is what gives it the power and controls and video. And actually, the VD, this is the video display from what I understand. So yeah, we're gonna open this up and take a better look at all of the chips, and all the capacitors. We at least know that RGB is working, so this does have video, this does have sound. So we got to just figure out why it doesn't have composite video coming out or to the television. Okay, so we're going to take this thing apart a little bit more, and we're going to focus now on the Super Nintendo. Alright, so here is the SF-1 Super Nintendo motherboard, and remarkably, this thing has everything that a normal Super Nintendo has. So, I mean, you can see it has the regular CPU and the PPU-1 and PPU-2. So those are standard chips that you find in the Super Nintendo for the CPU and PPU. This is the working RAM. You can see sound chips over here. The chip I'm most interested in, though, is this guy right here. So this is the RGB encoder chip. So what this does is it takes the RGB, and then from there it derives a bunch of other video signals that it sends out. So it sends out S-video, it sends out composite video, and from what I've learned so far is that this Super Nintendo delivers S-video to the television. So the television displays in S-video and not composite. But from what I can see, composite and S-video are both shot. And so my suspicion is it has something to do with the RGB encoder over here. So maybe there's a bad chip, maybe there's a broken trace. It could also be related to these two capacitors here. I mean, things don't look so great on the board. I'm thinking about potentially replacing these as a preventative measure, if nothing else, and maybe just going around the board in general and seeing what other components might need to be cleaned up and replaced. So yeah, I'm going to start over here, and the first thing I'm going to do is go in with my multimeter and just test for connectivity, going from this port over here all the way to here, and seeing if I even have connections going from the chip to the out port. I can also potentially check over here too, because this is your standard Super Nintendo multi-out, and so this has also S-video and composite, and I know that both of these are not working, so that tends to suggest something wrong with like a connection here on the RGB encoder itself. So, if you've got two completely separate traces that are both showing you nothing, then maybe there's something wrong over here. So, yeah, so I'm going to just start going through and tracing everything out and seeing if I can figure out where the culprit lies. The only one other thing I wanted to notice or call everyone's attention to is there's a really weird bodge wire over here, and I don't know if this is factory or if this is somebody's attempt at trying to repair this thing. As you might guess, these things are not common. I've never seen one of these before. Sometimes you see weird crap that comes out of the factory, but honestly, this looks pretty amateur hour. I mean, it's a really big bodge wire. It's really thick, and I don't know why you'd even want to do this. So I'm gonna take a look at this and see what I can do. And I don't know if this is going to show up on the camera as well, but I can also see some evidence of capacitor fluid down here. So I'm definitely going to be changing out these caps and seeing what I can do to clean this up and get things in a better state. Okay, I'll be back in a second with some more updates. Okay, so I just wanted to give you guys a close-up of the RGB encoder. It's this little chip right here. And so this chip is responsible for receiving, red, green, and blue input from the PPU-2, this guy right here. And from there, what it does is it basically constructs some of the other video outputs, including S-video, composite video, and then you get RGB and C-Sync. Although those aren't created here, they're just passed through and used. And so I found that you see these two capacitors right here. These are 220 microfarad capacitors. They definitely leaked because you can see, you see these little vias here, these holes that send data from one end of the board to the other. They're actually really black. Like if you look at them under the microscope, you can see that there are there's black crap going through, especially right here. There's like 5 or 6 right here next to the RGB encoder. They're all covered in electrolytic fluid. So maybe the electrolytic fluid ate through some of these traces. I'm not sure. It also could just be these capacitors themselves. They're definitely bad, so I'm going to go ahead and replace them. But yeah, let me give you an idea of how things go from there. So if you flip over the board, there are quite a lot of resistors and some passive, other passives, some ceramic capacitors as well. You can see over here, this section, I did a lot of cleaning already in this area, but you can see that this area here was affected by capacitors. You can actually see like the leaks are not present here on these resistors, but you can see these guys are kind of dull and corroded looking. So yeah, this is where I'm going to pull out the capacitors. But anyhow, the video signal gets processed more by some of these passive components. And then eventually it comes out to here. And so what I've learned is that, the SF1 television actually accepts S-video and not composite video from the Super Nintendo board. So S-video is created and then it's sent to here. But it's also broken down and sent here as well. This is the SNES multi-out. This should get composite video. This should get S-video and RGB. It does get RGB, so I can see RGB. That's how I know that this motherboard is mostly working. But yeah, the fact that it's getting nothing, and it's really far removed from that damage, and these capacitors don't seem to have done any leaking. So what that tells me is that it's probably something happening here at the source. So probably there's an issue with this chip, or one of the connections, major connections coming out from this chip, or maybe it's just these capacitors themselves. If they're critical for the way that this chip operates, they're definitely out of spec. So I'll start here. I'm going to replace these capacitors. I've already cleaned the board a fair amount. I'm going to take out my multimeter and start testing connections between traces, and then we're going to come back and see what all of that does, and hopefully we can get some video out again. Alright, so we're back, and yeah, so I have the television turned on, and we're about to do a quick test, and I'll show you guys exactly what I did to work on this system so far. So yeah, so you can see that I replaced those old caps with two completely new ones. So that's these guys right over here. And in the course of taking the original capacitors off, I discovered that one of the traces that run directly underneath the capacitor was cut. So normally there's like a little via there that goes from that point where the wire is soldered in, and it goes to a transistor on the underside. And unfortunately right now I really can't show it to you because I have everything rigged up. But yeah, that connection was cut, so I just took a little patch wire and I connected it to reestablish the connection that used to be there. Otherwise, everything else looked good, and I cleaned it all up. I did test out the traces from that RGB encoder, and they all looked like they were okay. So that was the only one connection I noticed that was bad. So yeah, so as you can see, this is a completely crazy setup. I have the Japanese version of Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past plugged in, and thankfully connecting it is not that bad. So this whole array of wires is what you need to plug the system back in. So it's actually not that bad to test. You can just kind of leave it hanging like this and test it out. So yeah, so the television is on, and like I told you before, the TV works just fine. So now I'm going to go ahead and just flip that and check it out. So we have a picture. And man, this picture looks so good. It's S-video and not composite, so that's a big reason why everything looks so sharp. And yeah, so this SF1 appears to be fixed. I mean, I'm still going to test out a couple of other things. I don't know if the SNES multi-out port is working correctly, and I really can't test it in this kind of dangerous state that it's currently in. So I'm going to have to go ahead and reassemble and test it out. If there are any problems still, I'll follow up with some more cutscenes, but I mean, I literally just tested this right now. It looks like the television is working again. So yeah, this is a success. All right, so I just wanted to follow up with one final little scene just to kind of show you the full functionality of this console. So you can see now I've fully reassembled the system. Everything is looking absolutely gorgeous. No issues of any kind that I can detect. So you've got S-Video here, and you know, I've got my controller, and I tested both ports. Everything is working perfectly, so that's wonderful. But yeah, what I wanted to do too is just show you guys the video out. So, you know, here's the SNES multi-out port. That's the same as any Super Nintendo or Super Famicom. And I have that going into the RetroTink, and now it's displaying composite video on this monitor, plus audio as well. So potentially you can send the signal out to two sources. So you can have S-Video on this monitor, and then you could potentially send composite, S-Video, or RGB to an additional monitor. So that makes this actually a really cool system, because you could potentially, like, you know, play light gun games on it while simultaneously sending the RGB out to an OSSC and then to a capture device. I mean, it's just such an awesome console, and I really feel privileged to have had the opportunity to work on one of these and try it out for myself. We're going to have this SF1 television at the next Long Island Retro Gaming Expo, so you guys will get to see this in person yourselves in the coming years. And yeah, so I think, you know, that about wraps it up for this repair. I'm really glad that we got this historical piece of hardware back to life. So yeah, if you like this content, then definitely subscribe to the channel, and you know, I post videos like this every Friday, and yeah, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!